It's time for the drive with Q on Sports Radio 102.9 FM The Game. Now, here's Q.
Good afternoon, everyone. 4 o'clock straight up on the East Coast. It is indeed a Tuesday edition of the drive with Q coming at you live inside the friendly confines of the Sports Radio 102.9 FM. The Game Studios, Southwest Florida's newest game in town, powered by the Coastal Sports Network. I'm your host, as always, Rich Quinones. We'll take you up to 6 o'clock straight up on a very interesting January the 14th, 2025. As always, don't forget the 727-858-6650. That'll get you involved in a little two-way sports talk, bring something to the table. As I mentioned, 2 hours to play with, and I guess I'm going to have to figure out a way to just take the lumps on this Tuesday because I was very distraught last night. Let me just say that. I was extremely distraught last night watching what transpired in the Minnesota Vikings and the Rams wildcard game to cap off wildcard weekend, which was pretty much a snooze fest other than Tampa Bay and Washington. But last night, and I will get into my guy, slinging Sammy Darnold in a moment. But last night just proved once again that the Minnesota Vikings as a whole, as a franchise, are just a bunch of friggin' frauds. That's all. I mean, I don't know. How can you be a Vikings fan? I feel bad for the Vikings fan. I mean, you're winning 13 games, 12 games, 14 games, 11 games, 12 games. You know, you got all this talent. You've got weapons across the board over the last 15, 20, 25, 30 years. You're making these Super Bowl appearances, never get over the hump. You're 15-1, can't get over the hump. Playoff loss after playoff loss after playoff loss again. And what happens last night? The Minnesota Vikings didn't even show up. And I will say this. Let me give credit to where credit is due. Let me give credit to the Rams and that defense, and they played really well, and they were very stingy. The offensive line for the Vikings absolutely did a porous job. 100%, they did not keep their quarterback upright. And in the end, the Vikings, they're going home. 27-9 loss to the Rams. The Rams move on to take on Philly on Sunday. Now, here's the elephant in the room. Slinging Sammy Darnold, who I said yesterday would finish, this is what I said yesterday, 26 of 34 for 263 and two touchdowns. Pardon me. Sam Darnold went 25 of 40 for 246 and a touchdown. Let me just, before you guys attack me, those numbers, you say, not bad, right? Sam Darnold played horribly last night. Sam Darnold cost himself $130 million last night. Sam Darnold was the poorest elephant in the room, and the glass slipper did not fit last night for Sam Darnold. And I will say this to my faithful, to my loyal listeners out there. You guys warned me. You guys warned me. You said this all along, and yet I was in my own little world. I was above the clouds. I didn't want to hear the noise. I was talking about my player props. Oh, by the way, 3-0 player props. But I was all on slinging Sammy Darnold. I was actually pushing for the Giants if Minnesota did not want to re-sign him and give him dollars to make him the bridge quarterback. I even mentioned maybe even going back to the Jets as a viable option. 3, 4, 5-year quarterback, having not to play him. But you guys warned me. You guys pleaded with me. You guys begged me, stop talking about Sam Darnold. You pleaded with me, get off the Sam Darnold bandwagon. Stop it, Q. What are you doing? You have to go seek help. We need an intervention for you. I wasn't listening. And that was my problem. I did not admit I have a problem. And that was being on the Sam Darnold bandwagon. And you guys decided we're just going to have to let him find out on his own. And what happened? What happened? Last night, I'm watching the game unfold, and you just got to be kidding me. I mean, how does Sam Darnold and Aaron Glenn probably had the blueprint, right? He probably had the blueprint in that Lions game. How do you explain how poorly he played? I mean, am I to really sit here honestly and believe that this is who he is? And he basically took me for a ride? Is that where we're at? Because he was horrible last night, missing throws, taking sacks, holding on to the ball. I felt Aikman was almost willing him to try to get rid of the friggin' ball. Seeing ghosts, tap dancing, skedaddling, all over the place last night. Bad reads, interception, fumble returns for touchdowns. And I wouldn't listen to you guys. I refuse to listen to the listening audience, the loyal listeners, the knowledgeable sports fans that tune in. And for that, from the bottom of my heart, I am sorry. I'm sorry. It's all on me. It's all on me. Now, is he that bad? I don't think so. I really don't. I don't think he is that bad of a quarterback. How do you guys explain the season that he had? And all of a sudden, he's going to revert back to just being that guy? It doesn't make sense. Was the moment too big for Sam Darnold? You're talking about a quarterback that threw for 35 touchdowns, 4,300 yards. He was making plays all season long. And all of a sudden, I'm supposed to believe he has a bad game against Detroit and manifests itself, and this guy reverts back to a backup quarterback last night who couldn't get out of his own way? Sam Darnold lost money last night. He lost money. And listen, I don't know how the Vikings feel today. I would love to hear if there are Vikings fans out there, 727-858-9960. Get in on the show. Because you guys, are you beside yourself now? I mean, you look around and say, we're not going to win with this guy? I just don't know. I don't know, but I know this. The one thing I walked away with last night, this guy talked himself. This Sam Darnold went to potentially $130 million quarterback to now maybe Drew Lock-ish. And I'm not trying to be harsh on the guy. And the Rams defense did a hell of a job. Now, from a selfish standpoint, you know, why I'm even more aggravated is because now these reports are coming out that J.J. McCarthy is off the table. Think about this. He's coming off the injury. Darnold, comeback player of the year. Sign him. Win a couple playoff games. You got your franchise quarterback. We trade the draft pick. He's coming off an injury. Now, forget it. I mean, the talk is now that Sam Darnold gifted back the QB job to McCarthy with his performance over the last two games. I don't know if that's fair. I don't know if that's foul. I don't know if that's in bounds or not. The Browns, the Raiders, the Giants, and the Jets, they were all prepared for these mega packages to try to get McCarthy out of Minnesota. And now it seems though the Vikings are locked in. They've got their quarterback of the future. And now Sam Darnold might be on the outside looking in. Listen, I've seen bad quarterbacking play. And the offensive line, to be fair, did not help out Sam Darnold. How many times was he sacked last night? 8? And if the Rams defense puts together that type of effort on the road against Philly, they can beat the Eagles. They can beat the Philadelphia Eagles. But it's just sometimes, you know, we talked about Baker Mayfield the other day. You know, Baker's going to be good for that one turnover, that one fumble, that back-breaking play or throw or pick. That's what we saw with Darnold last night. And look, I got suckered in, man. I got suckered in. I really did. You know, Vince was waiting. You guys couldn't wait for me to get in on the air today, right? Yeah, listen, you guys tried to warn me. 100%. You guys tried to warn me. You did. And maybe I just bought in to, you know, the hype, the recency bias. Trevor chimes in, loyal listeners try to warn you last night of the pitfalls of backing, slinging Sammy Darnold. X-Man might need a man up Tuesday. Am I right, Vince? He did not play well. He didn't. He did not play well. I got a new listener. Very colorful handle. Stop using Sam Darnold as Kevin O. Scapegoat. I mean, is that what I'm doing? Is that what I'm doing right now? Because when they were scoring 28, 35 points a game, I didn't hear anything. I didn't hear anything. Did you guys? I didn't. Seriously. I just, listen, you guys tried to warn me. You tried to warn me. And is this who he is? He went from 130, he went from 20, 30 million a year quarterback over 5 years, a buck 20 to who knows. Now, I believe a team is going to still pay him. I believe because in the NFL, look at some of the quarterbacking play in the NFL. It's bad. It's really not that good, man. And I don't know what the sentiment is among Vikings fans. And give credit to the Rams. You guys called it. The only thing I was right about yesterday were my player props. That's it. That was it. Darnold, under passing yards. Hello, we knew that was going to happen. Darnold, over 11 rushing yards. We saw the scamper. And then Hawkinson, receiving yards. Other than that, I spit the bit on a Manolo man up, Lunas Loca Monday of the drive with Q. I was so off. You guys had 17 of 26, 274, 14 of 31, a buck 87. You basically, all the naysayers came out and said at least a pick and a fumble. And that's what he gave you. That's what he gave you. So we got a lot of NFL playoff on the table. Lloyd Vance will join me in about 30. You got the buzz coming out. Well, a couple things. Did you guys see, I don't know if you saw the video of Shady McCoy, who basically came out and pretty much ripped Jalen Hurts. Pretty much said that Jalen Hurts gave no effort in that game against the Packers. Coming off the concussion, a little bit of rust. And I mean, if you saw the video, I want to get your thoughts on it. And I don't care about, Sirianni came out and already mentioned the A.J. Brown stuff. I'm not concerned with the A.J. Brown nonsense, whatever. He was reading a friggin' book. Apparently that's what he's been doing all season long. That's fine. The worst thing to come out of that game was that jackass of a fan who, by the way, good job by the NFL, good job by the Philadelphia Eagles, banning him for life for basically berating Packers fans. Get that POS out of here, man. I mean, that guy, that idiot, you made yourself famous, right? You made yourself famous. Now, all of a sudden, you turn around, you got a wife and you got a daughter. You probably speak to them like that at home. So you got the shady stuff on Jalen Hurts. And I don't think it was a lack of effort from Jalen Hurts. I think Jalen Hurts was just coming off the rust, to be quite honest with you. So we'll dive into that a little bit. And the buzz, the rumor, and if it makes sense at all. And I called this, what was it, last year at some time? Even when we were talking about the hardball coming out of Michigan and Deion Sanders with Colorado, we knew the handwriting was on the wall for Mike McCarthy. Aside from what Jerry Jones said, almost gave him a couple votes of confidence. And yet, the Dallas Cowboys, Jerry Jones, they move on from Mike McCarthy. Now the rumor mill, the interest, the flirtation, the mutual respect, Deion Sanders. So everyone wants to connect the dots. Your next head coach of the Dallas Cowboys, Deion Sanders, Coach Prime. Jones and Sanders are talking about the Cowboys coaching job, and I think it would be a colossal mistake. I think it would be a colossal mistake for the Dallas Cowboys to hire Deion Sanders. Right now, the Dallas Cowboys job, the vacancy, the head coaching vacancy, it's not appealing. It isn't. And that's why I think if the Cowboys actually do anything remotely intelligently, which the Cowboys and intelligent, we don't want to put them in the same conversation. The smart thing to do is hire someone that has familiarity, recent familiarity with what goes on within that organization. Not a player removed 30 years ago, 25 years ago. Or give one of these young coordinators a shot, a Ben Johnson, an Aaron Glenn. I just think if Jerry Jones is really serious about this, what does that say about the Cowboys? And this is no knock on Deion. This is not about Deion Sanders. So don't misconstrue it. Don't. Okay. This is not about Deion Sanders and if he can coach NFL players, because quite frankly, it's a different animal from 18, 19-year-old kids to these guys, because 24, 25, 26, you're mature, man. I'm sorry. It's a totally different animal. Older vets making millions and millions of dollars. So they turn around on Monday. They let go of McCarthy after 5 seasons. And if you remember, rules prohibit any interviews to be scheduled yet. So McCarthy is expected to interview with the Bears tomorrow. The Saints are also expected to interview McCarthy. But, look at these jobs out there right now. Look at these jobs. The Raiders, the Saints, the Jets, the Cowboys, Jacksonville, the Bears. What's the most appealing spot for a coach? I mean, you've got some bad contracts with the Dallas Cowboys, man. You already know what Jerry Jones is. He's a meddlesome owner, period. He's a meddlesome owner. And going in, that's what you're signing up for. So if you're saying to yourself, okay, this is an appealing spot. This is where I want to be. You better understand. You better understand. And again, Aikman came out last night. And if you watched the pregame, Aikman basically was saying, look, they don't have a plan. And Aikman, and I take for what Aikman says, I take his word on it. I mean, you talk about being connected to the Cowboys, Aikman is. He doesn't believe Dallas is a coveted job. I agree. I agree. I don't think it is. The Cowboys, they're not America's team. They're not. And listen, I get it. You've got 32 jobs in the NFL. And more times than not, you'll make 6, 7, 8 million a year, right? Okay, fine. But again, man, you have to strip it down. Is that an organization? Is that a franchise that you believe Jerry Jones has had how many head coaches in 30 something odd years? 9? 9 head coaches? You're talking every 4 or 5 years, you're making a change? There's no consistency. There's no continuity. You know what Jerry is. And just because you were a beloved player and have a track record and won in the past and you come back home, that doesn't mean diddly. It doesn't mean squat. It doesn't mean it's going to pan out. The Cowboys are not a destination anymore. They're just not. They're a downtrodden franchise that can't win. They might win in the regular season, but come playoff time, come Super Bowl time, the Cowboys win again in July and August. That's all. And the talking heads want to talk Yankees, Cowboys, LeBron. That's it. But there's no sizzle. There's no substance. They got bad contracts. They got a bunch of divas on that team. They got a bunch of underachieving players. They got a bunch of overrated players. And they got a meddlesome owner who's the de facto GM who has no plans to sell the team. So let's make a splash. Why? Because now you think if you hire Deion Sanders, you're going to be able to package Shador. That's the dream. Not happening, man. It's not. It's ludicrous. If I'm the Cowboys, I don't go that route. Bring in a coordinator. Bring in, Aaron Glenn, Ben Johnson. Test the waters. Think outside the box. Stop. Not even about Deion right now, but stop with this. The NFL wants to retread all these coaches. All these coaches, every year, Gruden's name comes up, right? John Gruden. Before it was Pete Carroll, it was Bill Belichick, retread, Bill Cowher. You want to come out of the booth? Cushy job with CBS? He's not coming back to coaching. He doesn't want to deal with that nonsense anymore. 25-hour days, 7 days a week, no sleep, no life. No, thank you. Deion's gone from basically being the toast of Boulder. Now all of a sudden you want to step foot in the NFL parameters? You want to cut your teeth in the NFL? I think it would be, listen, I'm telling you right now, I'm not saying he couldn't get the job done. I can't put anything past Deion Sanders. He's come in. We know what he did at Jackson State. We know what he's doing and what he did in Colorado. And we understand the influence. And, he comes in and he's walking and he's talking and he's making things happen. The NFL is a different friggin' animal. It is a different animal, man. And you cannot go out if you're Jerry Jones and you cannot hire Deion Sanders and then get rid of him in 2 years. You have to have a long-term plan in place. And look at Jerry Jones's track record. I probably would venture to guess Mike McCarthy wanted 5 years, and Jerry Jones was like, I'll give you a year or two. And McCarthy said no. He said no. And I've always maintained this, and I've said this for so many years. I think it's very hard to be a great player and win with a franchise and then come back and try to be a head coach. Whether it's in baseball, whether it's in the NBA, whether it's in the NFL, it rarely pans out because this expectation is, man, that guy won when he was a player. He won when he was a player. We trust him, right? We trust him. We know we're going to be able to get the job done. It doesn't work like that. And I'm telling you, man, you're setting yourself up for failure. You really are. I think you're setting yourself up. I do. I think if you have a guy like that, right away, you're dealing with young kids and then you're going to men. And that's a bad mix, man. It's just the message. I just don't know. I don't know. Trevor chimes in. Sanders has too much to lose by taking that job. Expectations weren't that high at Colorado. They're super high with them boys. Aren't expectations always high with the Cowboys, though? Or any NFL team? And I think there was expectations when Deion came to Colorado. I definitely think there were. I mean, remember now, they beat TCU and they were the toast. They were the toast of the town, were they not? I think there's always expectations when your name is Deion Sanders. I just believe that. And I'm sure that it's intriguing, right? But if you're Colorado, here's another thing, and this is what, and you guys don't give me the old man screaming on the porch. If you're a college kid and Deion walks in your living room and Deion Sanders recruits you and he tells your parents, man, hey, man, I'm going to take care of your kid for the next 4 years. This kid's going to be Colorado Buffalo. He's going to get an education. He's going to play ball. He's going to have fun. He's going to be a man. I'm selling you on that. Come to my university, right? Because that's the pitch. I'm Deion friggin' Sanders. I'm pitching Colorado. And then what? You're going to bolt in a year or two? See, that was always the worry. And I already see the counter arguments from you guys, transfer portal, NILs. Hey, man, if the coaches are doing it, let the kids do it. Again, I think it's a different animal. That's all I'm saying. And there's a difference between, again, handling the media, handling the dysfunction, and then winning. Because when you start to lose, it weighs on you. And when you are a great player, Super Bowl winning player, Hall of Fame player, you're not accustomed to losing, man. You're not. You're not accustomed to losing. You're not. And it's a bitter pill to swallow. It really is. Dave chimes in. Appreciate it. We give up on our good quarterbacks, coddle bad quarterbacks. Our team showed up. Sam didn't. Any line will break down if you hold the ball too long. He held the ball so long on every play all year. Yeah, I mean, listen, it's a good point talking about the game last night, and I'm glad I'm getting to hear from some Minnesota Vikings fans. That's a brutal loss. I mean, every time in the playoffs, Minnesota finds a way to just lose a playoff game. I mean, a couple of years ago, Kirk Cousins on, what was it, the 4th and 8, and they threw a 3-yard check down, or 4th and 12. Tight end runs a 5-yard out against the Giants. Jones ran all over the place. Saquon ran all over the place. I mean, and they just beat the Giants 2 weeks prior to that on that long field goal on Christmas Day, and they had a great team. A couple of years ago, same thing with the Saints, losing playoff games. You go back to Favre losing playoff games. You go back to Anderson in 98 losing playoff games. What is it with friggin' Minnesota and the NFL playoffs? They can't get over that hump. And Darnold did hold the ball way too long last night. There were so many missed throws and opportunities, and I don't know if Detroit exposed them. I don't know if Aaron Glenn defensively, the game plan, you laid it out. Sam Darnold played really well for 14-something odd games. He did. You can't, how do you explain his stats, right? And he was winning. So if I'm going to judge other quarterbacks and say, well, all the guy does is win, Darnold won. He won. He put up gaudy numbers. He put up consistent numbers. He made plays when he needed to. And they have good offensive weapons, good running back, great wide receivers, talented tight end. They got players. But the offensive line didn't hold up. No quarterback's going to succeed. He was under duress. But some of his decision-making at this stage of his career, it was poor. It's got to frustrate the hell out of you. It's got to frustrate the hell out of you if you're a fan to watch that week in and week out. And that's why I think he will get paid. Someone's going to pay him. But, I thought Darnold you were looking at what, four for 120, I think I said 25 to 30 million. Now, is this recency bias? Come March, free agency period, come April, the draft, GMs, owners, are they going to turn back and rewind and watch the film the last 2 weeks? Or are they going to look at the whole picture with Sam Darnold, like some of these other quarterbacks? Or are you just going to remember one moment? A bad moment in the playoffs, because that's exactly what happened. He didn't play well last night. He just didn't. He didn't. And Minnesota didn't play well. And again, you guys nailed it. The Rams had the emotional lift. You have to go on the road, neutral site. The defense came to play. It's not like Stafford carved them up. They had that really good opening drive. But other than that, it was kind of, a couple possessions here and there. But Minnesota couldn't muster anything up. And then you had the big defensive plays. You had a couple of the bad penalties. You had a couple of the drives that stalled. You had some backbreaking penalties. And Minnesota never got off the mat. And when your quarterback, who you believe was your franchise quarterback, is not seeing the field clearly and holding on to the ball too long and taking just inexplicable sacks, those are rookie mistakes, man. And if that's really who he is, then yeah, buyer beware. But I still maintain a team will pay him, because it's just the market. When we talk about the quarterback position in the NFL, quarterbacks get paid. They do. 727-858-6650. Good stuff with the comments. We'll keep them rolling on the other side. 4:30, we'll take up to 6. A lot of NFL. Coaching carousel, the retreading of coaches. We will dive into that. Divisional matchups are set. We'll do a little sneak peek into the opening lines as well. And it's not that I've ranked or rated these quarterbacks, but I have a couple of interesting stats I want to share with you guys, because, again, this kind of trumps the argument. I think if you're a fan of any of these teams left, right, obviously there's something in common. And I think sometimes we need to gloss over stats. We need to gloss over stats, and we just have to look on face value. What's the worth of some of these quarterbacks? Do they get the job done when they're called upon? Are they winning quarterbacks? I want to dive into that as well, but I want you guys to get in the conversation. Just a reminder, we are brought to you by our good friends over at Fresh Roasted Coffee. Check out the show notes, and you can use 20% off the first purchase, BYP20. That's your promo code, Fresh Roasted Coffee winner. Yet, it's not even around the corner. We are in the heart of winter. So warm up with a nice cup of Java. You can actually get your mixed blends as well. Visit them online, freshroastedcoffee.com. Also, Play It Again Sports. They're open 7 days a week. If you're in the South Jersey area, listening audience, or in Philly, go right across the bridge, 1450 Clements Bridge Road in Deptford, New Jersey. 7 days a week. They'll buy your used sports equipment and more. Just opened up the new store in Mount Laurel. Can't wait to check it out. Shout out to my guy Mark and the crew down there. We might be doing a show on site. They got some good jerseys, merchandise, free weights. They got the cleats, they got the lacrosse gear, the baseball gear, the golf equipment, and so much more. Open 7 days a week. And also, Zen Auto Concepts. Get your car detailed, especially if it's raining down there in the Florida area. Stuart, Florida, the #1 detailing shop in the state of Florida. They are always good to us, and they sponsor our drive in the game, which we will get into in the 5 o'clock hour. Don't forget, Lloyd Vance is going to join us. We will take you up to 6 o'clock straight up. We'll open it up on the other side with your comments, your texts, your thoughts as well. A lot of NFL to dive into. Maybe mix in a little NBA, maybe mix in a little hot stove football, but I definitely want to keep the conversation going with these head coaching vacancies in the NFL. And I'll tease it for the break, and I'll ask you guys like right now. I mentioned some of these teams: the Saints, Jacksonville, the Jets, Chicago, Dallas, the Raiders. Which spot do you guys believe at this moment, roster, constructed as is, present players on the roster, because we know it's going to change, is the best landing spot? If you are a coaching candidate, the best landing spot right now out of those teams that I just mentioned. Give me your thoughts on that. And I also wanted to remind you guys that Lloyd's going to join us, Lloyd Vance from Lloyd Vance's Inside Football, in about 15 or 20, and we'll have a little fun talking NFL with him, get his thoughts on the Philadelphia Eagles, who will host the Rams. And these comments by McCoy, man, basically just blasting Jalen Hurts. Unbelievable sometimes. Unbelievable. Some of these former players just constantly hate. It's really not a bad, it's a bad look by a former all-pro player, right, that played pretty well for the Philadelphia Eagles franchise. All right, 727-858-6650. Your comments on the other side. Keep it locked in. We'll take you up to 6 o'clock straight up on a Tuesday edition of The Drive with Q.
Adopt US Kids presents What to Expect When You're Expecting. A teenager. Learning the lingo.
Today I'm going to help parents translate teen slang. Now, when a teen says something is on fleek, it's exactly like saying, that's rad. It simply means that something is awesome or cool. Another one is totes. It's exactly like saying, totally, just shorter. As in, I totes love going to the mall with Becca. Another word you might hear is jelly. Jelly is a shorter, better way to say jealous. As in, Chloe, I am like so jelly of your unicorn phone case.
You don't have to speak teen to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will think you're, rad just the same. To learn more, visit adoptuskids.org. A public service announcement brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
This is the story of a very special woman. In a matter of seconds, she turned herself into a great mathematician or an entrepreneur. Her knowledge was limitless and still is. She could also make monsters disappear, especially those that lurked in the shadows under the bed. Once, this woman put back together a teenage girl's broken heart, which had been shattered in 1,000 pieces, just by giving her a bear hug. She masqueraded as a regular person at work, but as a superhero at home. Everyone knows her as Gabriella. I still call her Mom.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need to help, complete with tips and resources at aarp.org/caregiving. A public service announcement brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
Don't forget to get social with us. Follow Q at RichQ on Q. And now, back to Q.
All right, 4:35. We'll take up to 6. 727-858-6650. That's our text message.
Don't forget to get social with us.
And Auto Concepts. I got to keep hitting that friggin' bumper like that. I don't know why in the world. See, we didn't play in Bumper Guy today, which is a bad job by me. So let him tell you what you guys need to do right now.
Call or text the show at 727-858-6650. Now, back to Q.
I feel like it's traffic alert. On the Van Wyck. Yeah, they pack it up miles and miles and miles. You heard them. Get in on the conversation. All right, so best landing spot right now for some of these coaches. I think Chicago, believe it or not. Now, I don't know how sold you guys are on Caleb Williams, but you're talking about an all-time great franchise. Hasn't been for a lot of years, but just from a historical standpoint. Jacksonville, do you want to deal with the owner? You know, the owner basically came out in front of the GM and said, well, yeah, if a head coach comes in and starts questioning the GM, I might make the decision to get rid of the GM. I mean, where's your vote of confidence? Where's your vote of confidence? I think sometimes you got to think outside the box, right? Outside the box. That's just how I'm looking at it. Dave on Minnesota chimes in. Vikings receivers made him look good. He made plays, man. I watched enough of the Vikings, and if you're a diehard Vikings fan, obviously you were watching them, play by play all season long. I watched enough. I I thought he played well this season. I thought it was a nice comeback season, refreshing season from Darnold. Trevor, I think they should have went to Jones in the second half. Yeah, you're not going to do that. I'm telling you why you're not going to do that. Because he also won 14 games. Sam Darnold won 14 games. I mean, are we just going to dismiss that? Are we going to forget about it because he had a bad half or a 2-game stretch? I'm not doing that. I mean, Chargers won 11 games. You're going to bench Justin Herbert? Bo Nix won 10 games, but they lost by 24. You're going to bench Denver? You're going to bench Nix at the half? Well, bad example because they were only down 10-7, but you understand what I'm saying. I mean, look, it was a 24-3 game at the half, and they never got their offense in gear. They never did. They just never did, and he didn't play well. And the Rams defense, can we start giving a little credit to the Rams defense? They're not going to be a pushover against the Philadelphia Eagles. They're not, which sets the stage. I got the early lines. So you got 2 games on Saturday, divisional round. You guys love the divisional rounds. You know I'm partial to wild card weekend, but I do enjoy divisional rounds. Texans and the Chiefs. Kansas City's laying 8. That number's sitting right around 8. Total's 41.5. Washington on the road. The Commanders are getting 10 against the Detroit Lions, who only lost twice this year at home. The Rams and the Eagles. Eagles are laying 6.5. And that total is only 43.5. And then how about this? Baltimore going on the road against the Buffalo Bills. And Baltimore is a 1-point favorite. Now, Texans, Chiefs, Commanders, Lions, Rams, Eagles, Ravens, Bills. Do we have the best 8 teams left? You know, maybe you sit there and say, the Rams, the Texans, Commanders arrived a little early, but the Lions, yes. Kansas City, yes. Ravens and the Bills is going to be a hell of a game. And then the Philadelphia Eagles. I think these are going to be all very intriguing matchups. And I think they're going to be entertaining games. And I will say this, for our Eagle listening audience, our Eagle faithful that tunes in religiously, don't think that game is going to be a cakewalk. Don't. Joe D and Philly chiming in. Q, I actually watched McCoy basically blast Hurts in real time. I saw former Eagles linebacker, great Seth Joyner, come to Jalen Hurts' defense. I also saw that you posted this on X. Stats are sexy, wins are sexier. Yeah. I mean, all Jalen Hurts does, and Joe, appreciate it, pal, all he does is win. That's all he does. He just wins football games. So, you know, you want to read into the body language, how he answers or how he deals with the media, or, you know, sometimes it looks like he's not enjoying himself. Whatever. I'm not going to read into that too much. I'll tell you this. He just wins. Jalen Hurts just wins. His numbers don't have to be gaudy. They don't have to be sexy. They don't. They really don't. All you need is a quarterback that does enough to win the game. And if you can make a couple plays when you need that the most, then you think you got a franchise quarterback. And I feel as though Jalen Hurts, I feel some Eagles fans still are not sold on, you know, Jalen Hurts. You know, C on Twitter is chiming in, and he's like, Q, I hear exactly what you're saying, but you also get paid by stats. That's not necessarily true. It's just, I don't get it. So you're going to tell me right now, and again, if you guys buy into this, please let me know. Stats are great. Stats are when we're on the air and you guys are out at the bar having a couple pops or watching games with your friends. You're going to throw stats all the time. But the quarterback position, the quarterback is pegged by what? Wins and losses. That's really it. And Jalen Hurts against the blitz in the second half did fairly well against the Green Bay Packers. Jalen Hurts puts up consistently good numbers. Once in a while, Jalen Hurts will make the mistake. Once in a while, Jalen Hurts holds the ball too long. Once in a while, he makes the back-breaking play that you've guys seen, that we have witnessed. But more times than not, I would say 1 out of 10, 10 being the highest, like a peak performer. If he's sitting right at 8.5, that's not bad. I mean, wouldn't you guys take that? That's not bad at all. All right, 727-858-6650, 441, and we'll welcome in our good friend, host of Lloyd Vance's Insider Football, Lloyd Vance, who is kind enough to join us on this Tuesday edition of The Drive with Q on SR 1029 FM, The Game. I was going to say, you get a little, a little rest and relaxation. Where are you, in Puerto Rico? Just, living it up?
Yeah.
What's going on? Every time I turn around, you are a traveling man.
Oh, it's if you don't have it, it's good you had no friends that do. So yeah, we visited some friends down there in Puerto Rico. We had a great time and
Awesome.
got away from the snow for a little bit, but we're back, man. I was still able to watch football, which was great. They stream it everywhere. Q.
Yeah, I mean, I would venture to guess, no doubt, right? All right, so let's start with obviously the most recent last night, Minnesota and the Rams. And you know me, I've been on Slinging Sammy. I was waxing poetic the other day. I was being very boisterous about the stats, and here we go. And their offensive line played poorly. He played poorly. I was very shocked they came out of the gate offensively inept like that 2 weeks in a row against Detroit and now against the Rams in a playoff loss. Did we see the real Sam Darnold last night, or was this just a product of the Lions defense and the Rams defense and that emotional lift?
Well, Q, you and I had talked about it, and I always like, all right, we know the real Sam Darnold's going to show up, the guy that failed at the Jets and Carolina, and he did have a great season, but regular season and postseason is just so different in the National Football League, and I just don't know if the moment just got too big for him, and we knew the offensive line's been kind of banged up all season, and other than O'Neal, they don't have much up front for the Vikings, so. Yeah, it was a tough loss for them. And you get sacked 9 times, as you're saying, under duress. But you tip your caps to the Rams. They were playing with a lot of emotion, and they were taking those turnovers and creating points off of it.
Yeah, listen, their defense played really well, and I don't think it's going to be a cakewalk for the Philadelphia Eagles on Sunday, but we'll break down that game later on in the week. We'll also do it on a Back Your Play edition, too, later on this week. I mean, I thought the Ravens had a great game plan, right? I mean, offensively, give the ball to Henry, let Lamar do what he needs to do, and then you turn around, the tight ends making plays. Those were kind of my keys to the game. The Steelers got overwhelmed. They got punched in the gut. We heard all this talk about Justin Fields coming in for a couple plays. Now, yesterday was kind of that hot rod, if you will, topic of Mike Tomlin from a lot of the Steelers fan base and listeners that were chiming in. And I made the case that sometimes you just need a change of scenery. And if you go back, you won the Super Bowl in the second year, but it's what have you done for me lately? So we're going to argue the Marvin Lewises of the world. And you look at Tomlin in the regular season, that's great, but they haven't won a playoff game in forever. Are you shocked? Were you surprised that the Steelers are going to stand pat? And did you believe if the Steelers had a poor showing, then Mike Tomlin should be on the hot seat?
Q, this is their fifth straight loss, so they kind of leaked oil going into the playoffs, and it was just like, all right, this is kind of what I expected in terms of the Steelers this season, but yeah, long term, you have to look and say, okay, is he a Jeff Fisher type? Is he a Marvin Lewis? As you said, has he hit that peak with a team? And you're talking about a guy that's been there over 15 plus years, and is it change needed? I know when Andy Reid, when I covered him at the end, it was 14 years and it had run its course. So, but I know people in the Steelers organization for the past talking to them, they have the Steelers way of doing things. It's like family, you know what I mean? They like Mike Tomlin. They like the direction he just moved the team over the years, and they like that consistency. Now, they are going to have to clean some things up. Particularly, they got to get some playmakers on that offensive side of the football. Pickens just can't do it by himself, and he may not even be the answer. So maybe they need another receiver. That offensive line has needed a lot of work since Ponce's retired a couple years ago, and just has not been the same unit. So, yeah, it wasn't a surprise because it's a Pittsburgh way, but definitely he should be on a hot seat.
So I was getting hammered the other day, and I was stating my case why I would not be surprised if they made a change. And we always talk about coaching in the NFL, right? So you're talking about the wide receiver. We know about Pickens. Okay, Mike Williams. Mike Williams was targeted 13 times as a Pittsburgh Steeler. He caught 9 of them for 132 yards, an average of 14.7 yards per catch and 1 touchdown. So you're saying Pittsburgh needed a wide receiver. They went out and they got a wide receiver. They didn't use the wide receiver. That to me is coaching malpractice. So again, that is part of the coaching staff, which is led by Mike Tomlin. And I'm not picking on him. I'm just making a point, right? That's all I'm saying. So I'll just let that marinate for a
Yeah,
moment.
it's a valid point, and you got to
Mm.
throw Arthur Smith in there. They brought him in to fix Canada's mess from the previous year, and Arthur Smith underachieving. And now the question I'll ask you: what about Russell Wilson? You think they'll bring him back?
No, I don't. Listen, Harris, Wilson, and Fields were all under 1-year contracts. So think about this. There's 2 teams in the NFL that don't have a quarterback under contract for next season. Pittsburgh and the Giants.
Yeah. So Omar Connor, general manager, he's got some work to do. They got to figure out what's going on there, and they need a long-term answer quarterback. Russ is 36, and do they want to give him, 3-year deal? And his play kind of declined at the end. I talked about all these straight losses, and yeah, his numbers when you look at him at the end, 20 of 29, 270, 2 TDs, and 0 touch interceptions, but they never really in this game. The Ravens just dominated. So something's got to change with the Steelers.
Listen, it's all about winning in the trenches, and they were able to rush for almost 300 yards. I was high on the Chargers, not heading into the season, but as the season progressed, I liked what Harbaugh was doing. I'm a Justin Herbert fan. I thought maybe he would be in play for MVP. I was giving you my case in August. He had a game to forget. Look, we're going to get on these quarterbacks. We're going to get on the Russell Wilsons. We're going to get on the Baker Mayfields in a moment, the Sam Darnolds. Justin Herbert puts up numbers year in and year out, and I'm wondering if they're starting to think, all right, is this guy really the answer now? Is he really going to be that legit franchise quarterback, or do you chalk it up to just the Texans defense came to play and the Chargers offense just wasn't able to muster any type of offense?
Oh, the Texans did play well, but I think the Chargers kind of handed them the game, and it was a situation they're 3.5 point favorite going into this game, and the Texans are another one of those teams kind of leaking oil, and sure, Anderson had a nice game, got a lot of pressure on Herbert, but he did not protect the football. And then you wonder about Jim Harbaugh, who is a conservative coach who wants to be physical, run the football, and play good defense. Maybe he does want a quarterback that's going to be slinging it all over the place, and maybe he'd like more of like a J.J. McCarthy type of guy that's going to be a game manager, kind of like what he did for him in Michigan. So, going to be interesting. I think Herbert, though, is their guy. Another quarterback that's going. They got to get him some receiver help.
Yeah.
Running back position, yeah, Dobbins had a nice comeback season, but they need a better running back as well. So some changes come with Chargers. I think they were a little early this year, Q. I thought it was a
Yep.
rebuilding year. Good story they got in, but they did not play well. They probably should have beaten the Texans the way the Texans are set up now. But we know that the Texans now are set up. They're going to be a big cupcake for the Chiefs.
It's a really fair point you bring up, right? Arriving a little early, Denver scores the first touchdown. They're up 7-0 against the Bills, and the Bills rip off 31. I mean, it's chess and checkers, right? It's a different animal. It really is. It's a different animal when you think about it. And we saw that in that game. I mean, the Bills right now are just poised, I believe, to make a really, really deep run. But Denver's a team that we can also say, hey, these guys arrived early, right? I mean, and that's okay. You get blown out, but you've got a quarterback in place. You have a veteran head coach that has won before, and the future looks bright for Denver. And then conversely, the Washington Commanders, my Washington Commanders, which I said on the air were going to make the playoffs and potentially win a game. What do? They go on the road in a tough spot. And again, the quarterback making plays, Jaden Daniels. We'll get to Tampa in a moment, but what impresses you the most about Jaden Daniels?
Jane Daniels is just dynamic player. We thought, okay, he may have hit that end of season kind of lull because he was great early in the season. Everybody talking about an MVP candidate, and then kind of had a little slow down there. But he picked it up, and he was incredible in this game. And he did not play like a rookie, and never gets too high, never gets too low in the game. And the leader of this team, it was a close battle. They were going in there as an underdog, and not a lot of people gave him a chance. I just had a feeling they were going to win it, so I picked them. But the thing is, Tampa Bay just didn't have an answer for how him making plays when it counted the most third down, fourth down in the red zone. And particularly, he moves the chains when he needs to. 13 rushes for only 36 yards, but he ran at key moments in the game and set up that game-winning doink field goal for the win for Washington. So another team, you're saying, okay, they're incomplete product, because their offensive line still needs some work. Their defense is a little older, but good win for them. And they're going to go into Detroit house money, no fear in that game.
Yeah, the only thing I would say is, Quinn, you turn around and you go for it. There was the one spot where they went for it, and I thought they should have kicked the field goal, but then he entrusts his quarterback on a fourth down play, and I think that's a culture-changing coaching decision, right? Instead of just kicking the field, no. Let's put pressure on these guys. Let me give the ball to my rookie quarterback and go out and make him play, and that's what he did. I mean, that's what happens when you have a coach that understands what it's like to change the culture and the narrative. And that's exactly what he's brought to the table. And then conversely, on the other side of the ball, you got a head coach that still looks friggin' clueless. And then you got the good Baker and then you got the bad Baker. I mean, for all that was great with Baker Mayfield, like if we're killing all these other quarterbacks, Mayfield put up historic numbers. You're talking about great numbers for him throughout his career this season, for the Bucs organization and the franchise. And then boom, what happens? He has the costly fumble.
Yeah, he did, Washington was able to capitalize on that, and Todd Bowles he had some head scratching moments in this game, particularly clock management
Always.
and whether to go for it, not go for it, punt. He's just. I've talked to a lot of people down in Tampa, Angels down there, and it's just like everybody is you either love him or you hate him with Todd Bowles, and I think it may weigh towards the other side. A lot of the fan base is kind of tired of what he's bringing to the table. They wonder if he's going to be a championship level coach. A game they probably should have had, but you tip your cap to the Washington Commanders. They go in there, and as I said, they're a young team, and Quinn has really energized this group. Fixed the defense. That, let's face it, they were kind of leaky last year, and at certain points this season, but they did a nice job against explosive Bucks team, holding them to only 20 points. So, it's going to be fun to watch this Washington team kind of go into Detroit.
Do we give the Eagles defense the most credit for Sunday's win over Green Bay, or did we maybe overinflate or overvalue the talent of Jordan Love? Because he did not play particularly well. I mean, I understand you're banged up. Everyone's banged up, but you're talking a quarterback that was making mistakes, taking sacks, 3 picks, 2 bad ones, not making plays, not igniting the offense. I understand they had some issues. They were down some weapons, but that was only a 10-0 game going into the locker room.
Yeah, you always thought the Eagles were in control, but they may have. You're like, okay, they probably should score some more points here, But the thing was, Jordan Love, he was just off, as you were saying, Q. He just couldn't get anything going, and they would have probably been smart to lean more on Jacobs. He was running really hard in this game, and the thing is, the Eagles defense. Fangio has done a great job in terms of just recreating this group. Last year so leaky. I think they were like 29th or 30th overall defensively, and then building around Jalen Carter and that group. They did a great job in terms of shutting down Green Bay, and that's what they're going to have to do. Because let's face it, I'm not sure the Eagles can win a shootout, particularly the way they're a conservative team. The Jalen Hurts only had 131 yards passing, and they're going to lean on Saquon, and they're going to be like, okay, let's put this defense out on the field. And the defense, as you said, came up big with all those turnovers in this game.
So let me go in that narrative with Jalen Hurts. You just mentioned offense and the numbers. I feel, and listen, you're close to the team, and you got family and friends that are diehard Eagles fans. I just want a quarterback that wins. I mean, they went 14-3 this year. I understand the stats are not always gaudy or sexy, and I know sometimes he makes a play that I still have people text me or comment, or even my buddies who are Eagles fans, and they're still not a Jalen Hurts fan. And I'm wondering, okay, what is it? Because a couple years ago, you're a play or two away from not only winning the Super Bowl, but most likely being MVP. And people are just going to remember him for the strict sack and the fumble return for the touchdown that changed the course of the game against Kansas City. But I feel as though, is it just locally that Jalen Hurts doesn't get his flowers, or is there a national sentiment or perspective that, Jalen Hurts is a nice quarterback, but Now you got an offensive line, you got a 2,000-yard rusher, you got, a wide receiver that wants to, tap into literature on the bench. You got all pros here, there, all over the place. You got a good tight end. Like, why is there this? I feel as though Jalen Hurts is maybe the most misunderstood quarterback in the NFL.
Yeah, and locally, definitely, I think there's some kind of there's a disconnect with some of the fans. I think they all want gaudy stats. You know what I mean? They look at fantasy football. They look at these prop bets, and they want a quarterback that throws for 300. And they always point to the Peyton Mannings and the Tom Brady's of the world and how they got it done. But Jalen Hurts gets it done a different way. He's going to move the chains when needed, running the football, and he's a good leader of this team, particularly the offensive side. Uh, he's been protecting the football lately. And yes, why not when you lead on one of the best offensive lines in football and then one of the best running backs? It, he's very preferable to, Jared Goff. They're similar. Two very good offensive lines, great rushing attack, and work with the weapons that you had. So, you can't put minuses against him for that. And you're right, Q. It's all about stacking the W's, and that's what he's doing at this point. Now, it will be interesting to see if they get in some kind of scoring battle, if he can beat teams from the pocket and put up 300 yards passing in a game, 3 touchdowns. But, do what you can to win the game. That's all that matters.
But he might not. I guess my point is he might not have to, right? If the Eagles fall behind, okay,
Hmm.
let's go by this. If the Eagles beat the Rams and you rely on Saquon, or if they're going to stack the box and you still got Goddard and Brown and the other tight end and Smith, you got weapons, right? And they can run the RPO, they can get Saquon going, whatever, and they win the game. And it's another ugly game because we want to give credit to the Rams. And then you have to go on the road and you're down 17-3 in a blink of an eye, right? It's tough because now, do you panic? Do you want to still keep pounding the rock with Saquon, or does he have to throw himself in the game? Or conversely, if they're up 17-3, now the Lions are a different animal because we know their offense can come right back. But say you're up 17-3, 17-6 in the third quarter against the Rams, and he's only thrown 18 passes, and he finishes the game, I don't know, 16-25 for a $165 and a touchdown, and he adds 40 yards on the ground, and they grind it out and win the game. Like, isn't that enough? Is my point. Like, isn't that enough? I would contradict myself and be a hypocrite if I turn around and say, give me the gaudy stuff. Just give me a quarterback that wins. And that's all he does. And everything else is smoke and mirrors is kind of my point. And I guess fans or people, they don't like that. They want the gaudy numbers.
Yeah, and he's just worried about stacking wins. And the key thing about Jalen is he doesn't have rabbit ears. A lot of quarterbacks a lot of years hear things and they, take it to heart. He just puts his head down and he goes to work and he's trying to get that W. You know, it if they do get down 17-3, I am very interested because Kellen Moore will have to throw out the Saquon narrative, and it's going to be on Jalen Hurts to throw this team back. And I want to
Sure.
see him do that. And I think that's what a lot of fans and nationally they want to see him have that big moment. And uh, I always say, is he top 10? Is he this? Is that? Forget about the rankings. He is a winner. That's all that matters. And you fall one of the teams like this. Look at Phil Simms. Growing up, everybody always says, "Oh, he's not the man." Well,
Do
you
what he
know
had to
what?
do.
He did what he had to do to get those wins. And
Yeah.
there's so many quarterbacks like that. And it's that grit, that determination. And John Elway for so many years, he put up big numbers and everybody said, "Oh, he's the man carrying his team." Well, he won his last two Super Bowls really as the guy, he made key catalyst moments, and that's what you need from your quarterback. You don't need all those gaudy stats.
And what else did they give him? They finally gave him a running game,
Yes, in
right?
which the Eagles have, and they have a devastating offensive line. I mean, think about that. That whole offensive line group. I think they had 3 All-Pros, first or second team, and then the rest of them got votes. So, they're dominant at the point of attack. I fully expect them to run it. Jared Verse and that Rams line that's kind of smallish. They're going to ball their fist up and hit them. And why not play that tough mentality? And if it works, don't change it.
Yeah, 5 o'clock straight up on a Tuesday edition of The Drive with Q right here on SR 1029 FM. The Game, Southwest Florida's newest game in town. Also on my YouTube channel. You can just Google Rich Q on Q. Give us a follow on X, Facebook. We are live on X as well, Rumble, and Twitch. Lloyd Vance, kind enough to join us. Host of Lloyd Vance's Insider Football. Catch him every Monday, 8 to 9, right here on SR 1029. You mentioned, with Saquon and the running back position, because same thing with Baltimore, right? If you get these guys running downhill, and you don't have a spy or roamer, or they're starting to get in that second level, game's over. I mean, playoff time, get to the quarterback, run the football. I mean, that's your recipe for success. Look at these teams that are left, right? The Philadelphia Eagles can run the football. The Rams can run the football. Baltimore can run the football. Detroit can run if needed. Now, what scares me a little bit, the Bills, because we know about their offense, man. And we know the season that Josh Allen has put up, it's just a historic season. And whether you're going to debate Lamar, Josh, James Cook quietly had 1,000 yards, but that offense is more or less predicated on the quarterbacking play. These other teams that we're talking about, right, their identity, Baltimore, Lamar, but still Derrick Henry. But man, you run the football, you're going to be a tough out.
Yes, it's that time of year, and I talk about the key pillars of any championship team: protecting the football, running it with authority, and then getting turnovers defensively are so key. And you talk about Kansas City. Just think about a couple of years ago, they won the Super Bowl because Pacheco was running the football with authority, and they changed, kind of their playbook, and they said, you know what, this is working. Why not, stick with this? And it's getting colder outside. So you talk about Buffalo, it's going to be extremely cold there. So I
Oh,
think the
yeah.
team that runs the hardest, whether it's the Bills or the Ravens, establishing the run, they're going to be the winner. And then in Philadelphia, I think that's going to be a big thing because you have the Rams coming across the country. It's an earlier game. It's going to be cold outside, and I think the Eagles will lean on Saquon Barkley. I think Kellen Moore is going to say, you know what, I'm just going to stick with this rather than try to throw it all over the place.
Let's get into some of the coaching movement or the carousel. Mike McCarthy, you almost thought it was a vote of confidence, finally out in Dallas. I'm wondering if it was more or less he wanted a long-term deal and Jerry just said no, or, like the guy at the bar on the first date, maybe he was looking for something a little better, peeking through the back door, right? I mean, Mike Grable now signs with New England, back with the Patriots. We've got Ben Johnson, Aaron Glenn, guys like that out there, some retread coaches, some young coordinators. And then, oh, by the way, we'll get into Deion Sanders. But what's your take on McCarthy out in Dallas?
Yes, there was a situation where I think Jerry kind of forced his hand, with McCarthy. I think he maybe wanted to have him stick around and maybe tinker and change some things, but wouldn't give him that long term deal that he wanted. And we'll see if McCarthy lands with somebody else. But Q, we've talked about this over and over again. Jerry Jones is the owner and the
Yeah,
GM. Don't forget that. So it's his show. You know what I mean? And he wants a quarterback. No, not just quarterback, but the head coach that he can
right, right,
be
right.
the puppet master. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's Jerry's show, and he wants someone that's going to work underneath him. Yes, McCarthy had that regular season success, but they could not turn a corner. Playoffs had a lot of injuries this year. They're always talking about that, but um, it's going to be interesting to see who takes that job. But uh, just a marriage that kind of came to an end. What he was there, 4 or 5 years, so you know had a long enough time where they could say, okay, they had a nice snapshot to see if he could get it done, and he had that past success with Green Bay so long ago. So it's going to be interesting to see if he lands on his feet with the Bears. A lot of people are talking about him landing there.
Aikman brought up a point last night where he mentioned that it's just not the most appealing landing spot anymore. And I know Michael Irvin took exception to it because he is, Mr. Rah Rah Cowboy. But I think Aikman's spot on. I think, if I believe the Cowboys, if they want to do the not sexy but smart hire, you hire someone that has familiarity of that organization. And I'm not talking about a guy like Dion that's 20 something years removed from the NFL game. Yes, he still has ties to it, but someone that's recently been in that building, if that makes sense. And the name that pops up and the name that I think, where I'm going with this is who? Kellen Moore. I mean, to me, it just seems like that would be the guy you probably want to at least interview.
Yeah, yes, and Jerry is loyal to his guys. He gets somebody, and he's familiar with them. North Turner, Dave Camp, Wade Phillips, all these guys had worked for the Dallas Cowboys at one point before they became head coach. So Kellen Moore could make some sense there. I'm also thinking if he wants to make a splash, Lincoln Riley may be out there. Somebody who has some familiarity in that region of the country. But it's going to be interesting to see who takes that job because, as you said, Q, they're just not going to move forward until Jerry Jones is ready to. And I know everybody keeps saying, "Oh, Stephen Jones, his son, is trying to reel him in," and it's just not going to happen. And I think McCarthy, he probably was like, "All right, enough's enough," and we saw with Parcells there. At a certain time,
Shelf
uh,
life.
yeah, you're just tired of hearing that same old narrative from you want to say a non-football man. You know what I mean? Like, be the owner. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
They need a head of football operations that's going to build that team because he has so many blind spots. Think about now. What are they going to do with Micah Parsons and some of these other contract
sure.
situations that he's created?
Yeah, I mean, listen, they're still obviously in the early stages, but you've got a candidate in Moore played for the Cowboys for a couple of years, 2015 to 17, 2 years as Dak's backup, spent a year as the team's quarterback coach for I think 4 more as their offensive coordinator. Obviously has the connection to the organization. Its current quarterback is interviewed for head coaching jobs in recent years, understands that cycle. Dallas's offense, 18.9 points per game this season, 25th in the NFL. With Philly right now, the Eagles' offense is at 6 with 27 per game. So obviously, look, you got to be fair too, and let's not split hairs, but talent across the board, the Eagles are an extremely talented offensive team. But I believe if you want to make that splash, not the sexy hire, but the smart hire. The other thing is this: 9 coaches in 30 something odd years. So that tells me the shelf life 3, 4, 5 years. Deion Sanders, everyone's trying to connect the dots. Deion. Here you go. Package deal, trade the picks, blah, blah, blah. Let's go and get your door. Package deal. You're shaking your head because I agree. And I'm not going to say Deion couldn't get it done, but this is not college. You got a massive ego dealing with another massive ego plus 53 massive egos. That's a recipe for disaster. So I say Deion Sanders to the Cowboys, and you say what?
Yeah, it's great talk show fodder, but I just don't see it happening, Q. I think he's done a great job in terms of turning around Colorado that was down program, and he's a good college coach, and that's a good situation for him where he can recruit kids, get them out of the portal, NIL money's there, and in the pros, he's going to have to build a staff. He's going to have to learn the pro game. It's just so different. And he's very early in his coaching career. And then you talk about that relationship with Jerry Jones. Would that really work? Would he give him the autonomy to run the team? And I don't see that happening. And then I see a clash happening. And trying to do fantasy football and Roto League, getting his son there and trading this, that's just not going to happen. I think that Tennessee or one of these teams at the top is going to take Shador and he's going to end up there. And it's fun to talk about, but and Michael Over may say it's going to happen, but I don't think Dion's going there to really coach the team. I think that Jerry Jones wants someone that he can quote unquote work with. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like Garrett was, and Garrett was his guy, and he kind of dictated everything in terms of the staff and the way that everything Dallas would run an organization. So, interesting place, and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I remember with the Jake Paul and Tyson fight, Irvin was basically saying they already had their guy, which people took as like somewhat of tampering, right? I mean, you talk about appealing landing spots right now. If you are a coaching candidate in the NFL, Chicago, New Orleans, New York, the Jets, Jacksonville, the Raiders, the Dallas Cowboys. You're an OC. You're a defense coordinator. You're an offensive coordinator. You're a coach looking to retread and get back in the NFL. Which is the most appealing landing spot?
Well, yeah, Q. If it's me, I'm going to one of these organizations that has an established quarterback that we're like, okay, this is our direction. And so you talk about Jacksonville, you have Trevor Lawrence there, number one overall pick. You can start anew with him. He's got the talent. That'd be a very good landing spot. Chicago Bears, obviously a football crazy area. That could be a good job. Caleb Williams needs somebody that's going to be an offensive minded coach and give him the opportunities. The Raiders, they're just another disaster. You just wonder what direction they're going in. They fired their GM. Tom Telesco's not there, so they need to hire a general manager, and then they don't have a quarterback, but they're picking high. So, maybe that could be desirable. The Jets, what is Woody Johnson doing? He's been there so many years, another meddling type owner. I just wouldn't say that's a good situation. Maybe New Orleans. New Orleans, they seem to give their coach a long time to have an opportunity. And that division, let's face it, you could win that division very quickly. So,
It's a poor division. If you are the Jets, my belief is if you interview Aaron Glenn, you don't let him leave the room. I mean, that's a guy that was drafted by the Jets, very good defensive player, has cut his teeth in the NFL, understands the workings of the NFL, the front offices, scout, coordinator, been around the block, talk about defense. Again, now, the reason I bring it up is this. If Aaron Rodgers decides he wants to come back, and we don't know right now what Aaron Rodgers is going to do, right? I mean, I think we don't even know if the Jets want Aaron Rodgers back. I feel as though if the name Mike McCarthy was splashed in Florham with the New York Jets and maybe Aaron Rodgers, his ears perk up a little bit, can we potentially see an Aaron Rodgers, Mike McCarthy reunion with the
no,
Jets?
no, I think Woody Johnson's not going to let Aaron Rodgers dictate who's coming in there. And it was weird, too, because at the
Well,
end,
why not?
McCarthy,
He did it before. He did it with
I know.
Hackett.
I know. Yeah, you would think he's learned his lesson after 2 years of failure but yeah, McCarthy and Rodgers, are they on the same page at this point? It ended kind of bad between the two of them at the Packers and Rodgers kind of won out and then they went with LaFleur and that was a good way to going. No, I think Aaron Rodgers is going to retire or they're going to let him, they may cut him. So, yeah, but
Just
that would be an interesting scenario.
real quick, NBC broadcast crew, Eagles Rams Sunday 3, Tirico, Collingsworth, Stark, and Kaylee Hartung, which I think we kind of all knew was going to be in NBC broadcast. So 727-858-6650. Lloyd Vance, kind enough to join us. We'll take you up to 6. Of course, Lloyd does a great job hosting Lloyd Vance's Insider Football. Yeah, I think right now, even like Jacksonville, right? Maybe Jacksonville has to go the route of a young coordinator, and they still have question marks with their quarterback, right? I mean, Trevor Lawrence coming off an injury. Look where they're look at some of these teams, and I'll pull it up real quick for you. Tennessee, Cleveland, the Giants, New England, Jacksonville, Vegas, the Jets, Carolina, New Orleans, Chicago. So Chicago, New Orleans, the Jets, Vegas, Jacksonville. You're talking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 teams right there. They need head coaches. Grable goes back to New England, and Robert Kraft, he understood he made a mistake with Gerard Mayo. And again, you got a player that had a lot of success, and I like to hire, but I also caution that sometimes you're bringing back a player that had a lot of success. It doesn't necessarily translate into winning football. But point being is, some of these teams that I mentioned, you need a quarterback. You got to get the head coach in place too, and you got to turn around and draft's right around the corner, man. I mean, that's so. I'm looking around, and your guess is as good as mine with some of these head coaching spots and some of these vacancies. And the other thing too, Lloyd, is if you're bringing in a head coach, his philosophy has to align with the GM, especially knowing that the draft is right around the corner. Does it not?
Yes, and so you're talking about you need to bring in somebody that's a culture changer that's going to change. Most of these organizations that you named are downtrodden. I mean, they're 13 lost team, 14 lost team. That they have nowhere to go but up, and they need somebody in there that's going to become the great elixir. Now, Vrabel's going to be interesting because yes, the Patriots decided they did not want a players coach. There was some things coming out. Mayo playing cards with the players on the plane rather than watching film, and he really was an X and O's guy. Well, Kraft, he said enough's enough, and he brings in Vrabel, who did a great job with the Tennessee Titans. Let's not forget about that. He did, you know, He's a little abrasive, but Kraft's kind of used to that. So maybe he's baby Belichick. We'll see if he's coming there and can turn his team around. But they do have the quarterback already in May, and that's what you're talking about. They have to have a coach, got to have a quarterback, and then you have to have that general manager. All three have to work together, that iron triangle. They have to, make decisions together and make sure they're building the team in the right direction. And all these other teams, they're really dysfunctional, and you wonder, like, okay, they just got to change the whole thing from top to bottom, and that's kind of what you've seen with the Jets.
Yeah. Kevin in North Jersey chimes in. Q, you brought up an interesting point with Sam Darnold. I'd be pissed too as a Giant fan because now they're not going to want to trade JJ McCarthy. And it's funny too because I thought if Darnold played well and they give him a contract, maybe that dangles the young kid out there. You got Tennessee, Cleveland, and the Giants. These are three teams that all need quarterbacks. What's Cleveland going to do? Cleveland's got Winston on the roster. Deshaun Watson tore his Achilles, another setback. You paid him all that money. He's not the answer. I think Thompson said they had another backup. He's not the answer. Right now, Cleveland's a mess. Do you think they just wipe the slate clear and just decide, you know what, we're going to draft a quarterback. We'll bring in a very cheap, who knows? It could be Darnold after last night, a very cheap bridge, no nonsense. Got to get rid of Winston. Got to get rid of Watson. What does Cleveland do at this moment?
Yeah, Cleveland's an interesting situation now. They got Stefanski still there, and the GM's still in place, and I think they're going to draft a quarterback. They restructured Deshaun Watson's contract,
Yep.
but as you said, he retore the Achilles. He's probably not going to play next season. So, then you're talking about, all right, then there's only 1 year left on that deal. They need to bring in a young guy or a retread that they think they can build around for a couple of years. So maybe Darnold ends up there, but I still think if Shador goes one place, whether it's Tennessee and then Cleveland, will sit there and say, okay, maybe they get Cam Ward. Just talking about prospects, and they realized Deshaun Watson was a colossal mistake, and they have to clean everything up from here.
I don't know if this is a bold prediction, but I think the first two quarterbacks taken are not two quarterbacks. I think Ward goes to the Titans, and you mentioned Cleveland. Your stock can rise, can it not? You look at that kid Carter from Penn State. He was a beast. Who's to say Cleveland doesn't turn around? They draft him, which basically means that you've got Hunter and then you've got Sanders still available. I think the Giants either trade the pick or they draft Hunter. That's where I'm at right now. That's where I'm at because I'm not.
He can be a guy come in. And he can be a difference maker.
I'm not sold. I'm not sold on Sanders. That's the problem. I'm not sold on Sanders. You're not drafting the kid because of his last name, right?
Yeah.
It's just, and I feel as though there might be watching last night the Giants and saying, "Okay, we'll live with a bridge and Sam Darnold for 2 years at $30 million. We're only going to pay him 15. We're not going to pay him 30."
Yeah, these quarterbacks in this draft, whether it's Ward, Sanders, none of them are that gotta have type player. You know what I mean? Andrew Luck and some of these other prospects coming out, they were can't miss kind of guys, and I just think all of them have flaws. And Shador, yeah, he's made some nice plays with Colorado, but you wonder, is he ready to make that jump in the National Football League? It's going to take a couple years learning curve. And then Cam Ward, he's been, it's his third school that he's been at. So is he a 1 year wonder? You wonder about that. So, yeah, if I'm the Giants and you get Abdul Carter and build that defense up and run the football, you could be like this year's Commanders. You could get back in the race fairly quickly if you build the right structure.
Some boards have Sanders really dropping. And if you look at some of these mock drafts, the Raiders need a quarterback. And the Raiders got rid of Antonio Pierce. And then there was a report maybe Brady, who, let's be honest, you have the three-headed brain trust. It's Seymour, it's Davis, and it's Brady. That's it. And I think Brady has a substantial amount of input. In fact, I might even go as far to say Tom Brady will not be in the booth next season. I just think it's going to be a ridiculous conflict of interest with him in the NFL and being part owner or having a stake in the Raiders. All that being said, Does Sanders and the Raiders make sense? And I'll even throw you one more. Is it a potential package deal if the hoodie's really off the table at UNC and now it's Dion, Shador at 7? You got the father, you got the son, you got the head coach, you got the quarterback. As ridiculous as it sounds, or do you go a different route? I think Sanders, it seems as though he's destined to be a Raider.
He would he would make a great Raider. He's an outlaw. The way Colorado plays, and a lot of moxie about him. Yeah, he would fit in with the Raiders culture. But the thing is, Tom Brady, as you said, is running the show, and I just don't see him signing on for Dion to be his head coach.
Yeah.
I just don't think that's going to happen now. Um, it As we go into the combine, the Senior Bowl, all these things, and we'll see where Shador participates, if he's going to be one of
All right,
those
let,
guys
let, let
that's
me ask
if
you
he
this, because
just
the
he
audience takes
runs
a
and
lot of,
all that.
yeah,
Yeah,
and forgive me for
no,
cutting you off.
good.
I've been doing it for 20 years, but the audience takes umbrage to some of my comments at times, which I'm fine with, some of my opinions, right? And they misconstrue it as hating. Okay, fine. So, case in point, no, I don't need to be drug tested. I got my coffee here. People watch highlights, man. And I'm calling out some of the listeners and fans, because sometimes they just watch highlights and they think they know what the hell they're talking about. If you really believe Sanders or Ward are going to burst on the scene and be all pros on Sunday, by all means, believe in your convictions and draft them. Is it just possible that I'm not high on those quarterbacks? I don't believe this is a very sexy, blown away quarterbacking class. That's my point. And I also understand need and want are two different things. And sometimes you have to think long term. Like, again, not apples and oranges. I'm not comparing a pro quarterback. And by the way, at this moment, Darnold has a pro career. Sanders hasn't. That's number one. He's played on friggin' Sundays. Sanders has played on Saturdays, right? So let's not put him in Canton just yet. I think he's overhyped. I really do. And I think a lot of it has to do with he's a very good player. But I also think your last name Sanders, your father's the head coach, you're in the spotlight. Sometimes there's a marketing, there's a branding, there's a throw it in your face. Fox has to do these games, and here are all the highlights. And then what happens when he ran up against a good defense? He didn't do shit. So, let's pump the brakes on how great we think some of these guys are going to be. That's all my point. So I ask you, you've covered the league, you've covered college football for 20 something odd years. Between these quarterbacks coming out, is Ward better than Sanders? Is Sanders better than Ward? Who's the most pro ready? And I'll take your opinion and I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I talked to some people, and some of them are saying that Cam Ward is more pro ready. He's been a lot more systems, and the offenses he runs are more pro esque. And you just wonder about Shador, and is he going to be adapt to the game? And we talk about, you were just saying that the leap there, coming from college to the pros, it's so different. So yeah, Sam Darnold won 14 games in the National Football League. That's saying a lot, and he was a very high draft pick when he came out, and it took him a couple years, and maybe he's going on the route of a Kurt Warner. He's a reclamation project that's done well, and these bonus babies coming out of college more than most fail. Jane Daniels is kind of the anomaly, and Bo Nix as well. They're coming out, they're ready, they're playing well, and they led their teams to playoffs. It just doesn't happen that often. And too often, the scouting community and everybody gets enamored with somebody, a college kid coming to NFL, and he just does not
Yeah.
live up to expectations. I think about Jamarcus Russell. I talked to so many scouts that were at that workout. They said the greatest workout ever, threw the ball better than anybody, and career was a total bust. So you
Yeah.
just don't know what you're going to get. And these general managers, it's a win now league, and that's what they have to do. They need to worry about 2025,
Hey, I'll
winning
tell you
now.
this. Sometimes a lot of these players come out with a lot of fanfare and they're humbled pretty fast. Josh Rosen. I mean, I called that bust a mile away. That kid flip flop on 4 or 5 teams. I think he's doing financial advisory work, right? I mean, and everyone was lauding Josh Rosen coming out. I remember having a conversation with you and my buddies. I was like, this kid
Yeah.
stinks. He's going to be such a bust. And look where. So again, man, this is like, Like if the Giants were to draft any of these quarterbacks, I got to support it. If your team drafts these players, it doesn't mean you have to like it. It doesn't mean you have to think it's the best fit or the right draft pick. I think there are certain teams where you fall in love with the name, you fall in love with the back of the jersey, and right away you think that's the splash. You have to. Yeah, and sometimes, look, you're not always going to get your Brady's or your Purdy's. Those are generation. It's so rare. It is. It's so rare. I mean, think about it. Fourth, fifth, sixth round draft pick. These guys, one turns out to arguably the greatest quarterback of all time. But I also think you can find a bridge. And I also believe if you have a top 5 draft pick, sometimes the smart thing to do is trade the pick so you can acquire draft capital. That's also been my argument. If the Giants were going to have the number 1 draft pick, I would have said trade it. Because I was tired of everyone saying it's got to be either Ward or Sanders. Trade it. Get draft capital. Build that way. And we've talked about this for years. You get these guys out of the top 10 or a quarterback in the second. You don't have to pay them.
Right. And the worst thing it could do for an organization in a coach and a GM is reach for the wrong guy. You get the wrong quarterback and you keep trying to hammer a square peg in a round hole and it's just not going to work. And soon enough, everybody, it's going to blow up and they're all going to be on. Think about Zach Wilson. There's a prime example. Somebody said, oh, the workout was spectacular. He put up the big numbers at BYU and let's face it, he was not a very good starting quarterback in the National
No.
Football League. And next thing you know, the coach is getting fired, and so is the GM that picked him. So, it happens very often, and it's that time of year. And when you look at the teams that are left, these teams, they all got their guy, but they get about him in a different way. Look, the Rams get Stafford in a trade. Jared Goff, this is his second spot. You know what I mean? Jalen Hurts, when he was drafted, they were talking about him being, a Swiss Army knife type of, slash player, and he's turned out to be a pretty good quarterback. So,
Yeah.
you got to have the quarterback. You got to make that right decision. And if the scouting department and GM think it's a reach with Shador Sanders, we'll just use him as an example, that they should not take him. But somebody's going to take him and think they can make him into the next, Mahomes, but more than likely it's not going to happen.
Yeah. And listen, I've been wrong on a lot of these quarterbacks. You know that, right? And some I've hit on. And I'll tell you the one I was grossly wrong on. I remember having arguments with people when Trubisky was coming out. And all I said was, if you believe in the pick, I can't get on you. If you really believe in your convictions, and it turned out it didn't pan out for him, right? But then there were also other quarterbacks where, and Jalen Hurts, you mentioned Jalen Hurts. When he was drafted, all I heard were angry. Why would you draft? You have a quarterback. You have a franchise quarterback in Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz now, again, is Ginger Jesus is out there as a backup. He's a journeyman quarterback. I heard someone say, oh, that's a good bridge next year for the Giants or the Jets. Have you watched him even when he was out there for a half? He can't play anymore. He can't.
Yeah, everybody wants instant reaction, instant results. You and I talked after the draft, and they
Yeah.
want to give grades and everything.
Yep.
I always remember one of the guys I was like, oh, Vince Young, he's going to be, and I watched him in a Rose Bowl win a national championship, and he was not ready for National Football League. He didn't put in the work, and he just never progressed. And there's just so many examples of these quarterbacks that just can't come into NFL because the game is just so different. And a lot of them been coddled since high school, since college. They're 5-star guys, and in the pros, everybody's a 5-star, and you
Yeah,
got to
and you
put
also
in the
have to
work.
wonder how they're going to react, right? Because young players that have had a lot of success coming in as rookies, there's the growth pains. We talk about the maturation process year 1 and 2, but you also have to see how they react when they lose. And now with the, just social media being magnified, and you go on IG or X after a loss and you have these comments. And I'm not saying those Ward and or Sanders, it seems every friggin' player. I mean, hell, people are getting on Neighbors because he was supporting Daniels. I mean, all right, it's not the end of the world. You're out of the playoffs. You didn't make the playoffs. The Giants stink. So you wanted to go see your buddy play. Not the end of the world, right? But there's also a situation where if you're a young quarterback and you're struggling and then you're getting blasted and you're going back and forth, the optics are always bad, man. And you're making a lot of money. You have an opportunity to make an obscene amount of money. So, for Jalen Hurts, who's boring, but his name's always out of print, his name's out of ink. Like, sometimes boring is better at times. And if my team respectively decides to draft one of these quarterbacks, I'll support it. Pardon me. I don't have to like the draft pick. There have been a lot of draft picks by the Giants over the years that I wholeheartedly disagreed with. I mean, we remember you and I were arguing when they drafted Saquon. I'm like, what are you doing? You don't take a running back top 5. And then they turn around, they drafted Daniel Jones at 6. And I'm like, what are you doing? You don't draft a guy who had a cup of coffee in college at 6. I mean, you're talking about a reach and a reach and a reach. And obviously, they didn't trade Saquon when they should have got value. They overpaid Daniel Jones. Saquon's breaking records, and Daniel Jones is a backup in Minnesota.
Yeah,
Right?
and Joe Shane, that's why he's worried. He may be looking at the wanted ads, but Mara thinks he's still got it.
They should have got
I
rid of
just
the GM. They should have
I
got rid
don't
of them
think
both.
I think he didn't just don't want to make a change. Q. I think he's just like,
Got rid of
oh,
them
he's
both.
got his heels dug in. Is that was his guy, the head coach and the GM. And the Giants, you just wonder what's going to do. And this is a key moment in are they going to be able to save their jobs and recreate their history? Because they've been very downtrodden for quite a while, just like some of those other teams that I talked about, and they got to change their overall culture to go move up. And you look at what Washington did; they changed everything, and it was the owner. The owner was the problem. They got rid of him, changed everything, in terms of the staff of the team, the coaches, and even a lot of the players. And now they're in the next round of playoffs.
Yeah, here's the issue though. If you're an owner and you come out right away and you give the GM and the head coach the vote of confidence and saying they're going to return, okay, I need a little more. Is it a 2-year contract? Or when the Giants are 2-8 next year at week 10 or a bye week, you're going to come on and we're going to have the conversation. Why do these guys still have a job? Like you're dead man walking. That's the problem I have. So when we look at like the Raiders decided this whole narrative, players play for the coach, that's BS. I think the domino started to drop when Mike Rabel interviewed with the Jets. And you use that as leverage. Then all of a sudden, the Patriots see that, we got to make a decision. The Raiders see that, we got to make a decision. Why? Because they're thinking ahead. They're thinking, here's a better deal. Here's a better opportunity. Let's throw cash at him. Let's throw the book at him. He's a carte blanche. Here we go. It was pretty much a wink, wink. He was going to go to New England once they fired Mayo. But now the Raiders turn around, they get rid of Antonio Pierce. Dallas turns around, they get rid of Mike McCarthy, right? Jacksonville, we knew Doug Peterson was out. I mean, do you want to play for an owner that goes on a Zoom call with the GM right there and basically tells the GM that if a head coach comes in and doesn't align with the GM might not have a job? So let's just get rid of Jacksonville. You mentioned New Orleans, and the way they retain head coaches and their coaching staff. All right, they also don't have a quarterback. So let's get rid of them. Then you got the Jets and Woody Johnson and his kids running the show, and Aaron Rodgers wanting to maybe come back and play, and he wants to bring in his own guys once again, his own players, his teammates. Doesn't matter. Get rid of them. That leaves what left? The Raiders, which are already a dysfunctional franchise, and the Dallas Cowboys, where Jerry Jones is the decision maker at the end of the day. And I don't know, even though there's 32 of these jobs, I don't know there's enough money to be thrown at me where every time there's a loss, name one other GM in the National Football League or maybe all of sports that speaks to the media after games.
No one, no one, and he's the show. He is the show. He has to have his radio show, and it's going to be up to Stephen Jones or whoever to take the team from him. But I just don't see it happening. Q, and all these franchises dysfunction everywhere. There's you do the plus minus chart, and they have lots of minuses for a lot of these teams, and you wonder are they going to be stuck in this purgatory for a while? With double digit losses and just their culture just being a losing one.
Yeah, I got a comment from Trash Talking Patty. Do you consider Trevor Lawrence in the group of quarterbacks that can't perform in the pros like they did in college? Trevor Lawrence, they threw a lot of money at him, man.
Yeah, that's a good one. I watched him ever since high school, 7-on-7s type of thing, and then Clemson. He was always the guy, and I still think he can play. He played pretty well a couple years ago, getting the team on a cusp to the playoffs, and I think they need some help in terms of defense. And that offensive line's been a mess for a number of years, so they got to get the right coach, though. Obviously, in there, somebody that's offensive minded to work with him, like a Slowick, like a Ben Johnson. We'll see who's going to take that job, but yeah, I still think Lawrence can be a reclamation act.
If the Lions were to have this deep run and get to the Super Bowl, I mean, obviously, you look at their coordinators respectively, Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson, right? They're the hot names, right? The sexy names right now. I mean, one's done a hell of a job defensively, and one's done a hell of a job from an offensive standpoint, because you look at the weapons, and they're a team that they can go up and down the field. Sometimes that's not the best thing, and I say it like this, and I know Dan Campbell wants to see his guys do well, but if they were to win it all, if they were to win the Super Bowl, you would think, all right, let's try to run it back. Well, that's not necessarily the case, because coordinators usually get the first run of the mill. Spags with the Giants, right? Come up with the game plan. Now all of a sudden he's a hot name going forward years ago. I guess the question is, sometimes when you win, it's almost like you're also losing in the end, because eventually you're going to lose these guys. You want the best for them, but you also have to say, look, man, if a head coaching opportunity comes along, take it. And then you kind of see, was it the coordinators or was it the head coach?
Yeah, and every year at the end of the Super Bowl, it's that snapshot in time with the confetti coming down, and that group will never be the same again. And that's what's really kind of special what the Chiefs are doing. Q, they won back to back, and if they can do three in a row, I mean that'll just be incredible. We'll see how that starts this upcoming weekend, but it's tough to get that consistency once you win, and everybody says, oh, it was because of me that we won, and now I want my piece of the pie, and a lot of times players want to leave, and uh, assistants want to move up, and front office guys get GM jobs. So yeah, you're right. Change is coming for any successful team.
You mentioned Kansas City, and I know how tough the AFC is, right? I mean, Baltimore, you've got Buffalo. It's a tough road ahead for Kansas City. If they were to, I think getting back to the Super Bowl in its own right is just ridiculous in this day of free agency and trades, and just the way the cap is worked in the NFL. If they win a third straight Super Bowl, do we? And I know they have to get there first, and this will be a conversation, a topic for another day, because I know you guys will just explode and smoke will come off my Mac. But I'll go with the head coach first. Does Andy Reid retire?
No, I think Andy Reid likes he's having fun what he's doing, and Patrick Holmes, what do you say, 30 now? So he's going to be around a long time, and I think Reid would like to have John Shula's record. So no, I don't think he doesn't retire.
So let me see right now. All time. So Belichick was what? How many away was he?
I think he's
Belichick.
like 12, 12,
No, I think no.
14.
Shula won 328. I think the hoodie was like 20 something away.
Okay,
Okay.
that's right.
Yeah. So let me. All right. So Shula won 328. Hallis won 318. Belichick won 302.
Okay.
Andy Reid's won 273 games. So let's do my liberal arts math. Let's just say right now, how old is Andy Reid? I mean, he's young, but he's also
I
getting
think
up
he's
there.
in his 60s. I think
So he's 55 wins away from tying.
yeah, and he's got the best quarterback around,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I think he's having fun doing it, and his family's older now, and why not keep going if you can, as long as Mahomes wants to, they have a good relationship. You talk about that coach quarterback relationship, and it's going to be interesting though. Like Kelsey, I anticipate him not being around the next couple of years. Maybe he'll retire if they win it, and they're going to have to put pieces around Mahomes as a lot of these guys age out, and then as you talked about, you know, guys leave. They want to go to greener pastures, and then
It's
there's
a lot of
injuries.
wins, man. I mean, 55 over 5 years, 11 wins. Belichick's at 302.
Yeah.
Belichick won 266 games with Kansas City. Andy Reid won 130 games with the Eagles. He was 130, 93, and 1. With Kansas City, he's 143 and 53. I mean, I remember when they wanted to run Andy Reid out of town.
I was in those press conferences, and he earned it, Q. You know what I mean? You hire your offensive line coach as your defensive
Juan
coordinator.
Castilla.
I mean, but hey, times
I
are
can't
different.
believe,
Times
still to
change.
this
It's
day,
just
that
crazy.
makes no sense.
Yeah, it was insane, but somehow it worked out for him. He ended up in Kansas City. They hired him right away, and you talk about, if I get fired here, I'm getting a job next day. Well, he really did,
Well,
and he had Alex Smith, and then the bridge
yeah.
to Mahomes.
You know what it was? I mean, after Jim Johnson passed away, you're talking about a defensive coordinator
Yeah,
that
that
was
was
with him for
huge.
what? Yeah. When was the Juan Castilla?
That was, I want to say, 2013 or so.
Hold on, I gotta.
Right around it. It was all part around there, that dream team where it all blew up and it was messy.
That was
Namdi.
2011 because that's when the Giants beat him early on in the season.
Yeah,
Castillo, he was the offensive line coach, he was defensive coordinator 2011, 2012.
yeah.
I mean, right
Yeah,
there,
he was
you try to pull that stuff
such a
now.
great guy in terms of offensive line. He was like Stoutland. I mean, he was very respected around the National Football League, but that was a very, we'll say a rogue decision by Andy. Maybe he did it on purpose to blow things up, and he's definitely excelled with the Chiefs.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right, my friend. We will let you get out of here. I know you and I will cut up a little BYP this week. We'll start to look at the divisional rounds. Don't forget, you catch Lloyd Vance. Lloyd Vance is Insider Football. Follow him on X at Lloyd Vance. Always kind enough to join us on a Tuesday edition of The Drive with Q. Rich Quinones here. We'll take you up to 6 o'clock. Straight up. Always appreciate a couple moments, my friend. Thank you.
All right, Q. Talk to you later.
All right. You got to be well. And we always appreciate Lloyd's appearance on the show.
Adopt US Kids presents What to Expect When You're Expecting. A teenager. Learning the lingo.
Today I'm going to help parents translate teen slang. Now, when a teen says something is on fleek, it's exactly like saying, that's rad. It simply means that something is awesome or cool. Another one is totes. It's exactly like saying, totally, just shorter. As in, I totes love going to the mall with Becca. Another word you might hear is jelly. Jelly is a shorter, better way to say jealous. As in, Chloe, I am like so jelly of your unicorn phone case.
You don't have to speak teen to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will think you're, rad just the same. To learn more, visit adoptuskids.org. A public service announcement brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
This is the story of a very special woman. In a matter of seconds, she turned herself into a great mathematician or an entrepreneur. Her knowledge was limitless and still is. She could also make monsters disappear, especially those that lurked in the shadows under the bed. Once, this woman put back together a teenage girl's broken heart, which had been shattered in 1,000 pieces, just by giving her a bear hug. She masqueraded as a regular person at work, but as a superhero at home. Everyone knows her as Gabriella. I still call her Mom.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need to help, complete with tips and resources at aarp.org/caregiving. A public service announcement brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
Download the Sports Radio 102.9 FM The Game app and tell your friends that Florida has a new leader in digital sports radio.
All right, 5:45. About 15 to play with. Appreciate Lloyd Vance hopping on board a Tuesday edition of The Drive. Rich Quinones here. We'll take you up to 6. 727-858-6650. That'll get you involved in the conversation. See what you guys have to say out there. Motown Mitch chiming in. Appreciate that. Mahomes has not been the best all season. Been mid at best. Yeah, Mahomes has not had a really good season. I mean, by Mahomes' standpoint, he just hasn't. He has not played that level, right? We always talk about, that all pro, all world, right? All world kind of, uh, what do we put him in, the Mount Rushmore, right? We always talk about that. But I think ultimately he's allowed to have a down season, right? He's allowed. Mahomes is a quarterback, and you guys have pointed out. We look at Kansas City. We know they're not. I look at Kansas City this year, and yeah, they had a ridiculous season. They had a ridiculous season. They really played well, but they're not a juggernaut. They're not. They're not a juggernaut team this year. I understand the record. I also think that they're beatable. They're beatable. We know the NFL is a watered down product. I think it's fascinating that they won as many games as they have. I think it's ridiculous. You go 15-2, that's unbelievable. But they also had some games where you can really make the case they should have lost. They could have lost to Denver, blocked field goal. They could have lost to Tampa Bay, late turnovers. They could have lost to the Raiders twice. I mean, it's not like they were blowing out teams. They had the loss to the Bills. They beat the Panthers by 3. They beat the Raiders by 2. They beat the Chargers by 2. They beat the Browns by 13. Now, as you guys mentioned, it's just because when it's all said and done, that's just how good they are. That's just how good they are. But they're not a team that I think, I don't look at the Chiefs this season and I'm like, yeah, this is the, 2007 Pats, or this is the 1999 Rams or 2000 Ravens. I think they're beatable. I do. I think they are beatable. And again, I think it's a situation where, you can pick them off at the right time. Look at that. Vince is obsessed with Darnold. Chiefs aren't a juggernaut as back-to-back champs, but Darnold is good because he won 14 games, not the team. Well, here's the thing. Do we not equate wins with the quarterback? I'll tell you what. You know what's going to be really friggin' funny? The Pittsburgh Steelers do not have a quarterback under contract. So because Vince is such a diehard Steelers fan, I want Vince to have the best possible option out there in free agency. So when Pittsburgh and Tomlin signs Darnold to a 4-year deal worth $120, please make sure you come on the air. You call in, you text in. Look, wins and losses, we tag them to the quarterback, whether we think it's fair or not. We tag them to the quarterback. And Trey Lance might have an opportunity to go latch on another team, by the way. And I think that's a kid, Trey Lance. I think that Trey Lance can be that reclamation project. Same thing with Justin Fields. You got to give these guys time and reps. And that's what they're missing. Opportunities. We want to bench them. We want to sit them. We want to give up on them. Everyone wanted to give up on Bryce Young. Bryce Young seems to have figured it out. The game is starting to slow down again for Bryce Young. There's no way you would root for the Eagles if that happened. No way. No. Absolutely not. You are a diehard Steelers fan, and I respect your fandom. Absolutely. 727-858-6650. Tom in Summers Point chiming in. Q, is a pretty interesting point that you brought up about Jalen Hurts. The numbers don't have to be gaudy. The stats don't have to be sexy. He just wins. I'm not sure what the national media's obsession with Jalen Hurts. I don't have a problem with him. He doesn't say anything that I really think blows anyone away. He doesn't give a little. He doesn't really sprout out. He's a team player. And as you alluded to, the guy just wins. He's a franchise quarterback. I think Jalen Hurts is misunderstood. I really do. I think and by the way, we're talking about these quarterbacks in the playoffs and the pressure. We thought Darnold last night, the pressure, trying to bank in and make some money. How about Josh Allen? How about Lamar Jackson? I told you guys, I refuse to make this a Lamar versus Josh Allen week. I'm going to sit back and just flat out enjoy that game. Two quarterbacks right now at the top of their game. And thank God that game is on Sunday because I've got the fights on Saturday night in Philadelphia. So I'll have to have an eye on the Lions and the Commanders and the Texans and the Chiefs. But there's pressure on Jared Goff. There's pressure on Jalen Hurts. There's pressure on Josh Allen, and there's pressure on Lamar Jackson. Patrick Mahomes doesn't have pressure. It's look, when you've had this level of success and you're winning MVPs and you're winning Super Bowls and you're going back to back, now it's almost like routine. It's like, all right, we'll see you. We'll see you in the AFC Championship game. Because the Kansas City Chiefs, 15-2, right? A lot of wins, not blowing anyone out. Come playoff time in Kansas City at home, you got to go on the road. That's when we see the magician that is Patrick Mahomes. That's when, okay, enough playing. Forget about the boys. It's time to be a man. Put your big boy pants on. And that's what Kansas City does. Start to get the wide receivers into the mix, start to run the ball a little bit. You got the veteran head coach on the sidelines. You got a very good offensive coordinator. You got a tight end that feels reborn, and Mahomes makes his plays. And I'll tell you, if it's against Buffalo or again, if it's against, say, the Ravens, that's going to be a hell of an AFC championship. A hell of an AFC championship. Pressure's on Q to get these comments out, especially the jokes. Where's Angel? He appreciates my humor. Yeah, we typically do the joke of the day on a Wednesday and a Thursday. We're going to have to move that. I mean, you guys wanted to rename all these segments. I mean, we went from a Man Up Monday to a Lunes Loca Monday, right? To a Manolo Monday, a Nacho Libre Tuesday. I mean, you guys are just throwing all these different segments and all these names and title sponsors all over the place. I can't even stick with the comments. It's ridiculous. Trevor. No, I'm sorry. Trash talking Patty again. Wow. For once, I actually agree with you, Q. I've been saying it for weeks about the Chiefs and their wins. Definitely beatable. They just squeaked out a whole lot of wins this season, very similar to the Eagles last year when the record was so cold. They were painful to watch. They hardly won a handful of those games. So yes, we finally agree. I mean, once in a while, I'll get the listening audience. Trevor was quiet today. The Bunker Boys just decided, it's funny because Angel's doing his thing today. Angel's catching up on things. He's doing his thing, but yet Angel's chiming in. So now Angel's texting me saying, thank you, madman, because obviously the commenters, again, where's Angel? He appreciates my humor. Those squeaked out wins are not a fluke. There's a lot of shaky nerves in the bunker. Oh man, if the Eagles lose on Sunday, oh my God, I'm going to be so giddy. Did that job fire that idiot, by the way? Let me see. The fan, Ryan Caldwell. The management at BCT Partners has been made aware of the video circulating involving an employee making offensive remarks outside of the workplace. BCT Partners denounce this type of behavior. We take this matter extremely seriously as an organization that has always stood for inclusivity. The conduct displayed was completely unacceptable and stands in direct opposition to our company values. Go ahead, BCT. We have already begun a full investigation as an internal personal matter to determine what actions will be taken. We sincerely apologize to everyone affected by this behavior and remain committed to fostering a culture of respect for all. This jerk-off should get fired. So this is the Eagles fan that was berating the Packers fan, and the kid sitting there recording it, right? Chess and checkers. I don't know if we would have had the restraint. I mean, you felt like you wanted to just knock this guy's teeth in, and his fiance's just taking the ammo, taking the shrapnel, taking the bullets. I mean, it's ridiculous. Unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. I will not hat tip anyone, by the way, but I'll say this. They did do a good job. You want me to say his name, But the Eagles did do a good job of finding who this friggin' clown is. And, good job, because you're supposed to go to a sporting event and have fun. You really are. I mean, after a while, you stop going because you got a bunch of jackasses. And this guy is married with a daughter. Now, if he speaks that way to a woman at a football game, imagine what the hell he's saying to his wife and his kid at home. Seriously, think about that for a moment. That's a disgrace. And now, because everyone has one of these, everything's captured. Everything is captured on video. Everything. All right. You know what? We will hat tip the man that loves the camera, Big Dom. We will hat tip him for stepping in and, as the man says so eloquently, doing his due diligence and finding out who this clown is. Yeah, and the Eagles should have. The Eagles should have banned him for life, and his job should fire him, because that's a bad look. You're representing, even when you're outside of the workplace, you still have ties to your employer. That's all. Right? Seriously. He does. He is married. He does. He does have a wife and kid at home. He does. He absolutely does. I read the report. I saw the bio. Yes. Yes, 100%. So once again, before you guys get on me, we fact checked. Unlike, the 4th and 26, we fact check. So point being is, you can't talk to somebody like that. You can't. You know what? You might be right. Big Don made sure he was at the coach's handshake on Sunday. Never met a camera he didn't like. All right, we got to start wrapping it up on a Tuesday. Good stuff from Lloyd Vance, and you guys chime in. And also, first-time listeners, we appreciate that engagement. You guys can follow us, like, comment, subscribe to the YouTube channel, Rich Q on Q. Do not forget. Trevor wants last word on this one. That would not be tolerated in the bunker. See, I feel as though the bunker boys have a semblance of disrespect, because we've seen them come on the show with some of their comments and how they've kind of fired off at me, and how you've also kind of fired off at some of the loyal, faithful listeners. And as I say this all the time to the bunker boys, there are those in this world that run, well, I don't want to say the fire because of the wildfires. I don't want to say that. Let's just say they run towards the chaos. There are those that run towards the chaos, right? And there are others that run away from the chaos. I'm just going to leave it at that on Tuesday. Somewhere high above the mountains, phones are sitting on airplane mode. Reception is not good. And there are others on the ground, boots to the ground, who run. Madman strikes me as a guy that runs towards the chaos. Towards the chaos. Some don't. That's all. And I'll leave it at that on a Tuesday. All right, busy show tomorrow. A little NBA, a lot of NFL. We're going to start mixing in some college hoops as well. Also, a national championship on Monday, so we'll walk you through that game. We'll get through more of the divisional matchups and the lines, so we'll get your thoughts on that. But as always, we invite you into the conversation, 727-858-6650. As we start wrapping up on a Tuesday, good stuff from Lloyd Vance. Appreciate our good friends over at Play It Again Sports in Mount Laurel and in Deptford, our good friends over at Zen Auto Concepts. And of course, fresh roasted coffee, 20% off. And if you have a cup of coffee, your skin will never crack. That's the thing. You have to have good coffee while you're debating and you're talking. Exactly. Vince knows exactly how we're doing it. Exactly, Vince. That's exactly how we do it as we sign off on this Tuesday. Have a wonderful Sports Tuesday. Angel Martinez, he was not behind the glass. We don't know where the incredible shrinking Hermano is. Perhaps he will join me on a Wednesday. Busy show tomorrow. Don't forget to download the app, SR 1029 FM, the game. Keep it locked and loaded. Have a good sports night. Thanks for tuning in to The Drive with Q. As always, I'm Rich Quinones. And as you guys alluded to, be safe, be sound. Hasta luego mañana. And hasta luego buen día.